Hope everyone enjoyed their holidays, and I wonder if everyone is as relieved as I am that they're over. All right, prior to the break, the committee made good progress, and we've reviewed a number of issues. We're starting to wind down the business for any new ideas that are going to come before us. Today's the last day we can bring up new ideas for the agenda. Now, the committee has requested additional information on the Community Redevelopment Agency and nonpartisan constitutional officers. We're going to discuss those two items, and then we're going to consider draft charter language for 4 specific proposed charter amendments. We've got a big agenda today, but I think we can get through everything. If we get close to 1:30 and there are only a few items left, what I'd like to do is stay a little bit longer if we can move through those items. What I'd like to do is to be able to get through the next phase of our planning process, which is to talk about the public hearings that we'll need. So with that, let's move ahead to item 2 on our agenda, and that is the approval of the minutes.
I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, we have a couple of citizens who have indicated that they would like to be heard today. If there are other people in the audience that would like to speak, please come up and get a speaker's card, and then...
Ma'am, I'm just wondering if the chair would let the public have copies of those minutes and then all of that. Do we those available to us?
We should have a copy.
Thanks.
Certainly. And we have 2 speakers. If there are others who'd like to be heard, please come fill out a speaker's card, and then we'll have them come forward. First of all, we have Marilyn Willis. Wills? Yes, I'm sorry, it is Marilyn Wills. Thank you. Ms. Wills, we allow each of the folks who are speaking to speak for 3 minutes. So if you'd watch your time, and if we have questions, we can ask those at the conclusion of your comments.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Wills. I live at 2326 Kilkenny Drive West. First of all, I'd like to thank you for serving on this committee, and I'd like to address the issue of voters who register as no party affiliation. In the 2016 election, candidates for City and County Commission, School Board, and County Judges all were listed as NPAs or no party affiliation. If you include the special district races like Soil and Water, Capital Region, and Piney Z races, there were 43 races on the ballot. All but 5 of those races were not affiliated with a political party. The clerk of the court, tax collector, sheriff, and property appraiser were party affiliated, and in the primary election, MPAs could not vote for any of the candidates for these offices who were in one of those 2 major parties. The Supervisor of Elections office is nonpartisan, so NPAs were able to vote in that primary race. In 2002, when Leon became a charter county, there were 8,947 voters registered as NPA. In 2016, there were 35,055 voters registered as no party affiliation. 61% of these voters voted in the general election, but only 11% of those voters voted in the primary. According to a 2015 Tampa Bay Times article, state and local turnout data shows that NPAs are less likely to vote in state and local elections. They are locked out of voting in the primaries in most races and just don't vote. It is time to make all of the races nonpartisan. What are the advantages? According to governmental consultant Kurt Spitzer, who was our go-to advisor on the last Charter Review Committee, party affiliation is a less important and less relevant indicator of future job performance in contests for local office than for state or federal office. The role and influence of local political parties is also lessened, and fees for filing in nonpartisan elections are somewhat lower. Other issues to consider: extreme candidates are usually eliminated. Candidates are more free to state beliefs rather than pandering to their party. And it eliminates blind, straight-ticket voting for a party rather than voting for the merits of a candidate. And finally, NPAs dislike excessive partisanship and are more likely to be motivated by issues such as the environment, education, or the economy. Tallahassee and Leon County are always looking for means to get recent university graduates to stay and build our economy. Well, according to Professor Susan McManus of the University of South Florida, the share of voter registrants 30 to 49 years of age is highest among NPAs, 36%, and minor parties, 33%, than among Democrats at 29% or Republicans at 28%. Voters ages 18 to 29 make up the smallest share of Republicans at 12% and the largest share of NPAs at 23%. Among Democrats, their share is 16%. Will these people stay in an area where they are disenfranchised at the polls? It's time to revisit this issue. Our constitutional officers should all run as nonpartisans, and since we know that there is no place for politics on our school board, our superintendent of schools should also be a nonpartisan office. The focus of the superintendent should be on what is best for our children and not party politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wells. I appreciate your comments. The next speaker is Robert Travis. Would you please come forward and state your name and address?
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Robert Travis. I reside at 2851 Muirwood Court, Tallahassee, zip 09, and I wish to talk about the consent decree of the early 1990s, in which the NAACP sued the county, and there was a consent decree that said the county would notify the NAACP of any changes, proposed changes regarding the changes as to whether or not we were making it partisan, nonpartisan, single-member districts. We, of course, oppose any changes to the that would be in violation of the consent decree. And I don't have that with me, but I will provide the committee with copies of that decree at a later date so that you can then be as fully aware of what it says as I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Travis. The next speaker is Commissioner Bill Proctor.
Good morning, Charter Review members. My name is Bill Proctor. Following comments from our president of the NAACP chapter, Mr. Travis, talking about the consent decree, I would merely caution that our county attorney would somehow balance whether the federal court's decree is a weightier legal matter than the concerns of a charter review commission. And this commission is not a lightweight commission by any means, but I would beg to believe, and for you to believe, that the weight of the federal court and what has already been chiseled out as demarcation to overcome historic disenfranchisement for members to sit on this commission. Well aware of the historicity of Commissioner Nick Maddox, who sits in this room now, being an at-large person with respect to the black issue, could blacks become elected countywide and all of that. I happen to serve and be the person who is the beneficiary recipient, more like responsibility for representing the blood-bought seat called District 1. Blood-bought because it derives from and evolves out of the 1965 Civil Rights Act. And that's very important to note, similar to the gentleman who came in the building in the room with me, the co-producer of a documentary called I Am a Man, that captures issues for men who were garbage workers in Memphis, Tennessee, 1968, 50 years ago when Dr. King was killed. I think that the need for the single-member districts, and as we have it, and unless the effort and the recommendation is to enlarge the representation of African-American community to reflect the 35% black makeup and composition of Leon County, then this commission should have 35%. But to the extent that this community has allowed for and has voted continuously for an at-large commissioner, it allows for this board to have. Now, is this community in its racial thinking and thought generous enough to self-elect 2-3 black people on this commission? I don't know. It ain't been proven. We have in place a system that our community has received, and the president of NAACP, Mr. Barnes, and people who were way older than me, way older, and I have tried to take seriously, just as a representative and receiving the baton for just a period of time, to represent the interests of which a blood-bought seat represents. Now, with regard to the party ID issue, it's very important because in our society, we should not have a bland, sanitized, no party, and I disagree vehemently with the previous speaker. Points that sound good on paper, but we know that party reflects values, thoughts, ideas on abortion, on gay rights, on civil rights, on human rights. A party label stands for something about what a person is going to stand for in the body politic and in this room and throughout this building. To take that labeling away, if you want to call it a label, a party, is to obfuscate conservatism and folk who just downright may not be progressive of thought. And let's say it like this: it's more a benefit for a conservative to not have a party label in this community than it is for others. And it's too much of an advantage and allows for persons who may be against immigration, persons who may be against desegregation, and your ideas about law and order or education. That label means something. And I think that most of you are not naive here in this room, and you know many of the nuances flowing from. So with regard to the stance that has been presented by Mr. Travis, Attorney Travis, I rise to say that as a commissioner of the District 1, that I support maintaining that system and the thought which generated the necessity for it to be created. I don't think that we have moved that far away. Now, we've had some people elected at large, but I need for you to recognize that when you want to crystallize where we are as a community, do not forget that ours is the economically most segregated community in America. And as long as we're number one in economic segregation in America, presented by University of Toronto and by Harvard University, not refuted by anybody locally at all, we need to keep the infrastructure that's in place. Thank you very much, Ms. Hinkle. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. The next speaker is Angela Hardiman.
Good
Good afternoon, Charter Committee members. My name is Angela Hardiman. I reside at 287 Narwhal Court, and I am here to speak strongly in favor of nonpartisan races for constitutional offices. As naive as it may sound, politics has no place in determining how well a job can be performed. Particularly these very important offices that affect us all. The safety of our community has nothing to do with political affiliation. When an officer of law arrives at a crime scene, there is no concern about what party he or she is affiliated with. Rather, we're concerned about their competence. Do they care? And will they work hard to resolve this matter? The proper education of our children is paramount. And again, political affiliation does not apply. What does apply is whether the leader will be tenacious in garnering the resources for the district, will the leader foster an environment of learning, and whether our children, my children, will be safe. I'm a staunch supporter of that lady right there, Doris Malloy. She is phenomenal. She will have my support. She does an incredible job. But it has nothing, in my opinion, nothing to do with her political affiliation. She's just phenomenal. She has a business mind. You go in, you're in and out, and it's wonderful. So my last point is, I thought this was profound. In one of his interviews, Philip Levine, who, as you all know, is a gubernatorial candidate, he quoted Mayor Bloomberg, and essentially he was quoting him on the effectiveness of local government. And the profound statement that he made that resonated with me was, there's no Democratic or Republican way to pick up trash. So I'll leave you all with that and ask you to level the field, make all constitutional offices nonpartisan, and compel the voter to be informed and not merely cast a vote based on the initial behind a candidate's name. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hardiman. Are there other speakers who would like to be heard?
Madam Chair, just one brief point.
Would you fill out a card, please?
Yes, no, ma'am, I didn't fill out a card. I'm sorry.
We can do that.
There you go.
I think it's very important that,
Come speak first and then fill it out.
Mr. Barnes, come speak,
Okay.
give your name and address, and then fill out the card and give it to
okay, I'll do that.
Staff.
Sorry, yeah. No, I hadn't intended to. My name is Wilson Barnes, and I live at 1949 Setting Sun Trail, and I'm one of those old people that my good friend referred to. I've come through about 8 decades of this stuff. So I've been there on the ground and see the need for a lot of things that maybe some of you all don't see. And I think it's very important. We've been talking about the disadvantage to independent voters. Well, they made the choice to be independent. For whatever the motivation was, they made the choice. As a Democrat, black Democrat, I made the choice, but I made the choice again, alluding to the policies that Mr. Proctor talked about. I believe in civil rights and equal opportunity. I don't believe in calling the President of the United States the first black president, saying he doesn't have a college degree and that he is not a citizen of the United States. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I just think it's wrong. And yet parties, persons from a particular party did that, the Republican Party. And I haven't heard yet of any Republicans saying, you're wrong, Mr. President. I haven't heard it. Now, let me come to the real chase of what I want to say. We've looked at it from the benefit of the independent voters. Look at it in terms of the opportunity of black folks who've given so much to this country for the last 500 years. In a partisan election, we comprise about 40% of the electorate. You know what we comprise in a general election? And I really want you to think about this. 20%. I did not serve in the Army as a proud African American for this great nation that my ancestors have been here for 500 years to lose a fair and ample opportunity to vote, to exercise my vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. And I believe that's all the speakers. All right, as we move forward, we have all of our committee members here today except Ken Hart. I wanted to just let you know that Ken is dealing with some pretty severe health issues and will not be able to be with us during the continuation of this committee. So I would ask you all to please keep him in your thoughts and prayers. But I thought it would be appropriate to let you know today that he's not here today and probably won't be with us for the duration of the meetings. All right. Again, I want to thank those citizens in the audience for attending and participating, and I would like to move on to Section 4 of the agenda. And I want to remind everybody that as a committee, we voted to request additional information on the following two items. The county administrator and the county attorney are going to walk us through each of those items separately, and then following their comments, we'll discuss each item. At the conclusion of that discussion, we'll need to vote on how we want to proceed. As the administrator and attorney will explain, each item contains a series of options for our consideration. The voting thresholds increase to move to the next step, and that is a majority of the people here today. We advanced those items with 4 votes, and now we'll need a simple majority to advance them further. So I'd like our county administrator, Vince Long, to step forward now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, committee members, and your chairman has covered it beautifully in terms of the overview, and I'll, in just a moment, get us started with the first item on your agenda. Before I do, let me just reiterate what your chairman gave you in terms of maybe sort of where we're at. After we are complete this agenda, we'll put a summary table up and kind of give you a check-in of where we're going. You all have deliberated lots of items thus far, and we may be in a position today where you're able to, as the chairman noted, to advance to the next step in the process, which is scheduling the public hearings. But obviously, we have a few more issues on the agenda today that are before you, and in just a moment, I'm going to introduce Wayne Tedder, who you all requested a presentation from today, who's in attendance. Our good friend Wayne and another good friend of ours, and my colleague, the city manager, Reese Goad, I should note, is also in attendance, so we appreciate you being here. Before I hand it off to Wayne, let me just remind you, committee members, that at your last meeting on this item, 4A, we presented additional information and analysis regarding your ability to impose standards on CRA expenditures. You'll recall at that time that the legal analysis provided to you concluded that imposing additional standards cannot be effectuated through the county charter, but that since we do have an interlocal agreement with the city of Tallahassee regarding the CRA, that any such concessions or amendments would have to be effectuated through and require mutual agreement of both parties as an amendment to the existing interlocal agreements. Also at your last meeting, there were not enough votes to move this item to the next step in terms of a proposed charter amendment. However, as I mentioned at the beginning, you did request some additional information, and specifically to have a presentation provided to you, and also for you all to have the ability to ask any questions that you might have of the presenter.
I just had a quick one, Vince, on the paragraph where you're talking about that you could not amend it. The authority for that really is quoted out of the interlocal agreement, right? It's the agreement between the county and the city, which is what they're relying on, saying that you cannot make any changes. So that's an agreement between the city and the county, essentially a contract.
I'll defer to her, but I think it was both. I think it's.
I mean, it's not a Florida statute.
Statutorily as well, but go ahead.
Because our opinion is because the CRA is a separate legal entity, we cannot effectuate a change to their process and their budget by charter amendment. We have in the past made changes to what the CRA does by virtue of an interlocal agreement between the CRA, the city, and the county. And so our suggestion is, if you wish to pursue that, that's the avenue that you need to utilize. We don't believe that you can lawfully modify or restrict the CRA's expenditure authority by a county charter amendment.
Would that be looking back retroactively or prospectively? Because it seems to me that a county charter amendment is at a different level than an interlocal agreement, and the county could make a decision, or more specifically, its voters could, to say, in the future, we're not looking to change what's in the past, but moving forward, anything bought with our tax dollars belongs to the taxpayer. And I think that, I mean, personally, it just seems to me that this, you're trying to quote, I say you, whoever wrote this is trying to quote an agreement that already exists, an interlocal agreement upon which the county only has a minority of representatives.
And
To say that we can or cannot,
let me ask a question about that. So, and I'll remind committee members, I didn't do this before, if you would like to speak, please turn up your cards, and I'll recognize you, I hope in the order that you've turned them up. So, is the position that you're taking that that it is not appropriate for this body to suggest charter language, but another way to approach it would be either seeking to have the city commission and the county commission make decisions on that, and if you wanted to put it into some sort of language, it would need to be done by petition vote or some other arena other than this committee?
I think the staff did not want to stymie the input from this group, but, pardon me, I was going to cough. But I don't believe you can do that by charter amendment. I don't believe that the Leon County Charter can impose upon this separate legal entity, which it is, a restriction on how they expend their money. Because after the tax increment money becomes the CRA's money, and it is a separate entity. So to give you, if you would, an avenue, that's why we suggested if you wanted to say, well, we can't do a charter amendment, Board of County Commissioners, we would like you to pursue an amendment to the existing interlocal agreement, which is in its third or fourth iteration, that does that. And so that's just why we recommended going that way.
Herb,
Yes.
my question is, I get into the mirror, looking backwards, looking forwards, like you're driving a car or plane. It seems to me that you've got the Florida Constitution, and as Vince explained to us, that's where the county draws its power. And the voters of the county, when they amend their charter, that's a Florida constitutional issue. And I just have a real problem with the idea that we can enter into a contract with the city about an interlocal thing that can forever prevent its voters from proposing an amendment to their constitution. I mean, to me, one's looking forward. Now, I get the idea that going backwards and messing with what's been done or changing the existing one, I totally get what you're saying here. But I respectfully want to say I think I disagree with the idea that the voters of this county can be restricted from in the future of an agreement with the city that was entered into in the past, that they can be forever restricted in the future from doing a charter amendment. I mean, or at least having the opportunity to vote on one. I mean, personally, I see a big difference there. I know you're probably the most esteemed county attorney in the state, and I'm just a citizen on the committee, but I'm trying to get that. It looks to me like this is being used to somewhat block or say we can't do that, but I'm not a big one that on the we can't do trail, but I think moving forward, I just don't understand that a city agreement where the city has a majority of votes on the interlocal agreement. Would that be true?
Yes.
So the city effectively controls whether the county can amend its charter. If we can't do it because of that agreement, you've handed over the keys to your city to the charter. I mean, to the county, to the charter. You've restricted the voters. We're being told we cannot vote on a charter amendment because of this agreement entered into where the city has the majority. So we might as well just, in my opinion, take the keys to the county, and say, here you go. I mean, that's my personal view of it.
I'd take that.
That's actually
Okay.
payments made at the end of the month.
Thank you for your comments. I presume that doesn't mean you're going to give him your car.
No, just making.
You've made a point. So I think at this point, it's appropriate to have Wayne Tedder come forward and speak to us about the CRA.
Good morning, everyone. As Lee indicated, I'm Wayne Tedder. I'm Assistant City Manager over Development Services and Economic Vitality for the City of Tallahassee. Let me just say thank you for the opportunity to present about the CRA. We've all heard comments within the last year and a half, a lot of comments about the CRA, and all that leads to is there's a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication of what the CRA is, how it works, and the responsibilities, how it moves forward. So it's a great opportunity, from my perspective, to at least go over some of those information. There has been some questions that were forwarded in an email. I hope this presentation hits it at a high level. I really am hoping not to dive deep into it. There's a lot of complexities to this, but I'll be glad to answer whatever questions you may have. So kind of moving forward, what is a community redevelopment area? It is something that is authorized by state statutes. I had in a presentation 222 active CRAs in the state of Florida. I think I saw a presentation this month where it may be up to 224 now. The overall goal of a CRA is to stabilize and revitalize areas. It is a focused financing tool for redevelopment, and it's really important that a CRA is not intended to define what we can do in our community. That is defined by our land development codes, our comprehensive plans, and our local land development policies. These things do not last forever. There's an expiration period, but they can go up to 30 to 40 years. There are 2 CRA districts inside the city limits. We have the Greater Frenchtown South Side. It was created in 2000 and it expires in 2030. We have the Downtown District, which was created in 2004, and it will sunset in 2034. Components of a CRA district, there's really 4 components. First of all, before you can have a CRA district in your community, you have to do a finding of necessity. Then there's a redevelopment agency that has to be created to implement the plan. And then there's a redevelopment plan that is required, is basically driven by the business owners and the property owners that live within that district. They tell us what they want for their community. And then you go into the implementation. And we'll go through each one of those very quickly. So first of all, finding of necessity. There's been a lot of conversations, concerns about slum and blight in our community. Well, you have to, state statutes describes what you look for when you identify these areas for considerations for a CRA. The highlighted red area, the text basically says 1 or more slum or blighted areas, or 1 or more areas in which there's a shortage of affordable housing. And then there's a second clause, and it's necessary in the best interest of the public health, safety, morals, and welfare of the residents of the municipality, which is very broad. When you're doing a finding of necessity, you don't have to say every individual parcel has to meet this criteria, but that district has to meet the criteria that is established by state statutes. There's been a lot of conversations say, hey, this area is not slum when we are bringing projects before you. Slum was, again, it's a definition defined in state statutes. We did not use this when we determined what a CRA was for the city of Tallahassee. When you look at blight, what are the characteristics of blight that we looked at? Everything that you see highlighted in red, I think, are applicable in both, could be applicable in both districts, such as inadequate parking facilities. Definitely have that in our downtown. Inadequate roadway facilities, public transportation. The assessed values in certain areas remain stagnant over a period of time. There are deteriorated sites, no doubt about that, in both the downtown and the Frenchtown Southside district, and density patterns. So that's just a few of the things that we looked at when we're considering the CRA districts. So one of the, and hopefully I'll hit some of the concerns that have been raised along the way, to implement these plans is a redevelopment agency. It was formed in 1998. I think it started off with all the city commissioners and 2 county commissioners, and then the county commissioners rotated off, and then they rotated back on. So right now, as it stands, we have 5, our full city commission sitting on the body, and then 4 additional county commissioners that sit on the CRA redevelopment agency. They are the ones at the end of the day that are charged with making the policy decisions and making the decisions of how we spend the CRA dollars. What's really important is you have 2 CRA districts, you can only have 1 board. So that's something that we have to address in the future. Redevelopment plan, again, the redevelopment plan is established by the stakeholders within that district, within that area. They tell us what they want. It's got to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. In other words, if we say in our downtown, we only want mixed-use residential development, and then all of a sudden they come in and say, we want light industrial, and use that, you can't use a CRA tool to override what we have established for our land use policies. And as you will see in a few minutes, it addresses the unique needs of particular areas. It is a living document. It is something that can be changed over time. Our current CRAs are 20-year plans. We know things can change within a matter of a year. Sometimes they don't change within 5 years or 10 years. So we have that ability to kind of follow along with what is reality in our community. What can be funded through the redevelopment plan, or what are eligible projects? Here's the whole list of it. And you can see it from new buildings, flood control projects, historic preservation, affordable housing. It's a wide list of projects that you can use CRA dollars to fund. Just to let you take a look at it real quick. Okay. So going back to the redevelopment plans, what do the redevelopment plans say for our two districts? Our downtown district is much different than our Frenchtown South Side. These are the criteria, or the main topics that our downtown plan, downtown district plan incorporates. Transportation improvements are important. Parking, providing additional parking is important. Providing mass transit, addressing our gateways into our downtown, addressing those deteriorated areas that we know existed within our downtown. Environmental cleanup. We have a lot of older areas in our community that has contamination issues, and we want to preserve our history in our community. And housing, affordable housing in the downtown is always an essential component. For our Frenchtown Southside district, it is a whole lot different. The character of the neighborhoods is something completely different than what we want in our downtown. These are the bullets for what is important from those citizens within those areas. Having jobs, having quality affordable housing, providing social services to address the needs of those areas, providing education for the youth. Citizen participation was a big deal, and it remains a big deal for the Frenchtown Southside areas. Transportation system and open space, parks, and landscaping. Those are the things that that district identified as being really important. Now, having a transparent process is extremely, extremely important through this. There are no expenditures of CRA dollars that are done at a staff level or at a management level. They go through a very detailed process, starting with the staff, going to a CAC, Citizen Advisory Committee, or a downtown redevelopment committee before they go for board approval. This happens in all cases. We'll go through each one of those. Just kind of give you a little bit of understanding of staff. We have 5 CRA staff with an annual operating budget of $966,000. This is FY18's budget. And you see how we have to break it out. Some administration is in the downtown district, and some costs are in the greater Frenchtown South Side. So kind of going back to the difference between the downtown district and the Frenchtown South Side district. What is important to realize is the advisory committee that we have, that we take these projects through in the downtown, look much, much different than what you have in the Frenchtown South Side. In the downtown, we're talking about very intense development, mixed-use developments. We need that legal counsel. We need people in the banking industry. We need that real estate industry. So when you look at the names of people in here, you see what they represent and how they technically provide recommendations to the board, to the CRA board. And when you go to the Frenchtown South Side citizen members, it's more of a qualitative approach to this district. And again, going to what the downtown, what their redevelopment plan asked for, these are the folks who are really representing the nuts and bolts in those neighborhoods. So what is TIF? Its ability to leverage property tax revenues to promote private sector development. And it's based on a frozen year value. And I think the best way of saying it is, when the CRA started, there was a tax value associated with the lands. That tax value still goes to the city and county. That is not taken away from the city or county in any means. But the next year after it goes into effect, whatever increases that happen in that district gets turned around and plugged into the CRA district. So if the taxes one year are $1,000, the next year it's $1,020, that $20 will go back into the CRA for programming. So that is how we deal with the frozen value. It's very important to recognize that CRA does not affect any school board or other special district assessments. What was there at the beginning remains, and it moves forward without any impact to those districts. So they can, tax increment revenues can be used immediately. They can be saved for particular projects. They can be bonded to maximize the ability to really get larger projects, but they must be used within the district in which they are collected. And they cannot be used for general government purposes. For instance, if Leon County or the City of Tallahassee want to build a jail or a police station, we cannot use those funds to develop those public uses. So TIF contributions, just to give you an idea of what is being contributed to the two districts, our Frenchtown Southside District, you see right here the total is about $2.7 million, and you can see the split between what is provided by the city and what is provided by the county tax revenues. And clearly you see in the gains in the Frenchtown Southside, the county provides their full millage within that district. Now in the downtown district, it's a little bit different. The county only provides half of their millage rate into that district. The remaining 4.1 mills, I believe 4 mills, goes back into county revenues. So when you hear that there's been just a few big developers that are the only ones who benefit from this district, it's very, very misleading. This is the list as of August of last year of all the projects that have been expended on by CRA funds. Affordable housing, there's been commercial facade business facility improvements, nonprofits have benefited, there's been commercial painting programs for small businesses, retail incentives, it's no longer applied right now. Major developments, you see that's the list. Out of all of that, there's been 280 projects that have benefited from the CRA. That's pretty substantial investment for our community. When you look at how we invest those dollars, these major redevelopment projects are key in how we do that. Without these major redevelopment projects, we do not have funding that will be generated in substantial amounts to help the remaining projects. So you look at project successes, you want to know how much we have invested into those larger projects. You can just follow along the last line here. There's been $14 million of assistance, estimated $229 million of private investment. The land, this is what's important. This land value, taxable value before those developments came in was $11 million. After they came in with the redevelopment, it's $190 million. Again, in every one of these examples, it was not the CRA board writing a check and giving it to the developer. It was basically the developer had to commit to these projects, they had to build these projects, and there were certainly some public benefits that were derived from some of those projects in the terms of things like what we desired for public parking, what we desired for use on the ground floor. Now, a CRA is intended to jumpstart a district, and this slide, I think, portrays that exceptionally well. You see the blue-colored properties. First of all, where you see the stars is where the CRA participated. Those blue-colored properties are projects that were completed between 2007 and 2013. You see all but one of those projects use CRA funding leveraging to move those projects forward. When you go into those pinkish-colored properties, only half of them utilize CRA. Those were between 2014 and 2017. Now we have projects under construction that you see outlined in the green, and those gray projects that are, some of them are actually under construction now. None of those projects utilize CRA funding. So the CRA did exactly what it was intended to do, is jumpstart the district and then let it be self-fulfilling as it moves forward. The values start leveling out. You take away the risk on the front side, and you allow that momentum to carry forward through the entire district. This is textbook policy of a CRA. So pending major developments, this is some of the projects that we have through the CRA's been in the news media recently out at Cascades Park. This is a $150 million investment to the community. Be glad to give you numbers if you need to understand rates of participation for that. Now, on this particular project, the property was in public ownership, been in public ownership 15, 20 years, generating zero tax revenue. This $150 million project will generate a substantial amount of tax revenues. And again, this being in the downtown district, some tax revenues will go into the CRA to be reprogrammed. and some will go to the county for programming as needed. 440 on North Monroe. This is across from the Doubletree Hotel, not Doubletree, Hotel Duval, sorry. This is it, also had CRA participation. We're moving forward with the development agreements on that project. I believe this is a $40 million project. Then we're still working on final development plans for Washington Square. It's right behind the courthouse.
Wayne, just a quick question. The slide you just showed, is that the Envision Credit Union
That
slide?
is correct.
Okay, thank you.
That is correct. Okay. All right, so successes, they vary. I want to kind of give you just a real quick taste of, it's not just the big developments that are coming in. In the Frenchtown, you know, we talked about the needs in Frenchtown was much different than you see in the downtown. This heritage market was a big deal for that community, and the CRA participated in making that happen. Early's Kitchen, and this is just a good example of, I believe there are 88 small and local businesses that have benefited from the CRA participation. And you see from what it was to what it was today, food's still just as good. You got the Crepe Vine on Railroad Avenue. That's what it was. This is what it is today, all because of participation from the CRA. You got Divas and Devils on North Monroe Street, the before and after. You have, this is the Proof Brewing, yes, out in Railroad Square. So there's been a lot of opportunities where the CRA has actually assisted a lot of the local businesses and local components of our community. Again, this is South Monroe Street. All right, so community issues. There's always been tough issues. Well, Big Bend Cares was a recipient of CRA funds. It is a nonprofit. They don't generate property taxes. But what they did do is come in and tear down an entire block of buildings that were dilapidated, really be frank, it was a very tough eyesore for the South Monroe corridor. I think you can all agree, you drive by it today, it's a beautiful building, it fits in really nice. It's the kind of development we're trying to encourage or leapfrog down in the South Monroe corridor. There was a lot of discussion on whether or not we fund a grocery store that was already coming into the district. This area is identified as a food desert. So that was one of the topics that we talked about as we moved through that project. Festivals and events. There's been a lot of funding of festival events. That's always a topic of discussion. Should we be doing that? So new development assistance, new development with no CRA assistance. I'll give you a good example. The Ballard Building, they originally came in and asked for assistance. We asked for two things, public parking and a commercial use on the ground floor. They couldn't commit, so they did not ask for development funding. They did not have to ask, they did not build additional structured parking. The Publix on Gain Street, no financial assistance. Hampton Inn and Suites. This is a $40 million apartment complex on Gain Street called the Enclave. They're in the process of getting another $40 million project just adjacent to it approved. This is the Standard in the Frenchtown District across from the Renaissance Center. That's the Renaissance Center here. We're looking south towards FAMU and FSU. Freight Yard, which is in Gain Street. Hotel Duval on Gain Street. Again, these are projects coming in at the end of the line where everything's starting to balance out financially. Recent discussions regarding county participation in the downtown. We did go before the City Commission to the Downtown District. We went before the City Commission as a reminder of looking at, well, has the Downtown District finished its mission? Is there still work to be done in the downtown? Again, going back to what are the things that we're looking for to accomplish in the Downtown District, you see that. So gateways are still an important component. I think we can all understand that the Tennessee Street corridor, the North Monroe corridor, especially when you get north of Tennessee Street, could still take a little bit of attention. And so when we're looking at projects, I think it's a great opportunity to look along those major corridors. Where we think we have made all the improvements or should not address major projects in those areas, Gain Street, you got FSU coming in with their arena district here. Those are state-owned buildings here. Cascades Park's complete. Again, that's part of Cascades Park. These areas are basically built out now, built out, stable residential office areas, stable areas. So really looking at opportunities for major project investment is where you don't see the X's. I think there's still those opportunities for a density pattern that is not conducive for our downtown. We can intensify those areas. Talk about infrastructure as investment. I think that was something else that Mr. Thames identified. Certainly, major infrastructure projects like Faneuil Way can jumpstart something just like Gain Street did. We don't have the funding to do this project in the CRA. I can just tell you it's way too big for the CRA. But that type of thinking certainly would jumpstart some of those areas in the Frenchtown South Side to make great improvements. And they're simple things, just sidewalks. It makes a huge difference to our businesses and our citizens in our community. Just beautiful examples of just simple things that we can spend CRA dollars to improve the infrastructure to serve our citizens. When you look at all the major infrastructure to serve these redevelopments, we've had staff look at, well, if we underground the power lines in our downtown district, it's about $32 million. If you address all the sidewalk needs that we have, about $3 million in need of sidewalks. If you look at roadway resurfacing, we've identified $2.8 million. If you look at water and sewer projects, and a lot of these areas are old water and sewer lines that need to be replaced to sustain the type of development we're trying to attract in our downtown district, $26 million. Total up, there's about a $75 million need for infrastructure improvements in our downtown district alone. This does not even touch any of our Frenchtown South Side, which the same exercise probably needs to occur. So at the City Commission, they basically, if it moves forward where the City Commission is the sole implementing agency for our downtown, they're going to come back and look at eliminating money for our large and small events. They took this action in October. Focus on those large projects that are in those targeted areas on the North Monroe. And again, this is just for the downtown district. And then focus on infrastructure projects. So with that, sure, if you've got any questions, I'll be glad to answer those.
Wayne, I want to compliment you, first of all, because I think you're a tremendous asset to the community, and the work y'all have done is, fantastic. It sells itself. My question simply, and you may not be familiar with the proposal we make, but what would bother you about it? The fact that what you take public money and the public, all it asks in return is they want to own what it buys. So I think you kind of, to some degree, in my way of thinking, you help me make my point when you talk about infrastructure.
Yes.
You talk about sidewalks, beautiful pictures. And I think the only place we disagree is a concern about, and to digress for a minute, and I only know what I've read in the paper, why would the FBI come to town, spread some money around, and try to get something if there wasn't some math that made sense? And if you had it where the public owned it, would that not remove that temptation to corruption? I'd like an open discourse with you, because I know some may view my proposal as an attack on the CRA, but it's not. I make money renting to people who have jobs, and there's no scenario where Arbor Properties profits if the city of Tallahassee and Leon County doesn't do well.
I think I'd address that in two parts. First of all, process, maintaining that pure process to make sure that it's open and transparent. I've seen no issue with the process we have in place where it goes from a staff recommendation to a citizen advisory committee recommendation to a board recommendation to indicate anything different than the process is pure. So from that perspective, I think that the catch is in place to make sure that things are pure and they happen in an open form of government. I've not seen anything that tells me different in the last 2 years I've been a part of the CRA. The second part is the needs of our Frenchtown South Side are completely different in our downtown. And you probably, from a developer's perspective, would understand this point. In our downtown, we're trying to get higher buildings, compact parking and parking structures. And if you ask in a suburban area, for example, your canopy development, if we were to ask you to say we want a 4-story apartment building with structured parking, you'd probably say it doesn't work financially.
At the price Mr. Gazzini's charging per acre, it just might.
Well, that's what you have this issue throughout the entire downtown. So the issue is you allow that risk to occur. You allow the developer to come in and you rebate. You don't hand him a check at the front side of this project. You allow him to build what he says he's going to build, come back into our community, provide the things we ask for our community. He is accepting that risk with his project, and that rebate is to address that risk on the front side. See it on Gain Street. After a period of time, there is no CRA participation. So the CRA did exactly what it needed to do on Gain Street to jumpstart it backs away and lets the private development take care of the rest.
But to take it one step further, it's still a transfer of public wealth to a private developer, correct? I mean,
No.
you're saying over time, but you're saying, let's take the 440 development, or take a contrast like your Aloft Hotel, which I'd say is a great success, but that investment went into a stormwater vault underneath it, right, which is available. Who wants to own the stormwater vault? But the public owns it, and it's available for other development, and I would say hats off, great job. I mean, wonderful. If you take, let's say, the 440 development, in my understanding is not as great as yours, you've got a developer who's going to walk out of the room with a $4 million check for a parking garage that he owns, not the city, not the county, that he owns long term. So my question is, what's so wrong with the idea, or what's threatening about the idea that the public should own that garage, even if it's a bigger garage? Maybe he leases spaces, but in my view, it's that transfer of wealth which set up this whole attempted sting, if the paper's right, because they come in with a little money and leave with a lot.
I'm not going to get into the...
I know, I don't want you to get into the
But I will
speculation
tell
there.
you-
It's just the motivation.
Again, going to the Aloft project. So the developer could have come in and said, okay, to satisfy stormwater needs, I'm going to build this stormwater pond that has an open area with a fenced-in area adjacent to a public right-of-way. That's not what we want for our downtown. We said in order for you to do what we want to be downtown, we want intense development, we will allow you to put your stormwater underground. And he said, that's going to cost a substantial amount of dollars. That was fair game for him to consider, saying, if you want my project to be intensified, how can you help me? And that's what the CRA did.
But the question there, the city or the county or the CRA owns that stormwater vault, correct?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay, well, my information is that they do. I'm not trying to sit there and act like an encyclopedia, but my information, I was told by someone who's supposed to know that they own that vault. Now, like I said, who wants to own a stormwater vault? But the point being, it's owned by the public. The deal worked. Thumbs up.
Yeah, so North American Properties. So there was no tax value for a Cascades project. No tax value at all being created by that property. Huge amount of risk to put a $150 million project there of that size. The parking, again, major impediment to that project. We are, as part of the approval process, going to get up to 229 parking spaces for that project, of public parking that is available to the parking. Not only that, we are getting substantial amount of public improvements along the right-of-way, the roadways, the sidewalks, undergrounding utilities. All of those kinds of things are the things we negotiate when we're saying, okay, if you want to come to this area, you won't see our participation, there are things that we need for our citizens in our community.
So that parking garage, and I'm just trying to understand, is that owned by the public, or how is it accessible by the public is I mean, because it gets to the heart of what the proposal is. They're putting money out. You've got a parking garage. Michael wants to go to the concert at Cascades Park. He drives down there.
Yep.
Can he park at that parking garage in that private development? Is my
Yes.
point.
Yes.
And
It's
so
public.
he has to pay to park there?
Sorry?
He has to pay to park there?
It's public parking. We'll do it just like any other parking structure in our
But
downtown.
so the county paid for the garage, basically, to encourage the development?
No, sir.
Okay, well,
Not all of it.
then you lost me there, because you were talking about the parking,
I think
and
we're
it
really
couldn't
getting
happen without
into the weeds. I'm not
CRA.
sure if it's beneficial for us to keep arguing parking.
I'm not trying to argue. I'm really just trying to. Well, the real question is, so what if we required that public money be used for things owned by the public? What would it do to the CRA? I mean, is there something going on behind the closet? I mean, is there all this private transfer? Would it really gum up the whole thing? Because what I hear is it's mostly infrastructure. You're almost doing exactly what this says. I mean, the Edison, you own the Edison, right?
I want to say about 4 projects on Gain Street, we have public parking.
All right,
Madam Chair?
let's have some other
Okay.
committee members have an opportunity to
Sure.
speak. Ken? Kim?
To your point about public parking specifically, or any infrastructure that belongs to the city of Tallahassee instead of a developer who builds that public parking and makes it available to us, there is no taxable value to city-owned parking if there is no taxing of that.
But there's still the $4 million that left the public coffer and went into somebody's pocket. That's my point.
The money that is used to reimburse the developer for building it is the increased tax value above the base value whenever the CRA went into
Does it
existence.
get paid now or when they pay their taxes?
When they pay their taxes, they get a percentage of it back. And if they don't create taxable value that's equal to that, they don't get it all back.
Okay, so the 440 deal and the $4 million garage there, he won't get the $4 million till he pays that $4 million in taxes, or will he
He's
get
got to use his own money to build it, yeah.
So he uses his own money. So where's the $4 million, and what's the whole controversy about? Where does that get applied?
That's what I'm having a hard time believing too.
Okay, so what is the participation in the project?
440 is what? I don't even know what that
It's
is.
North Monroe across from Hotel Duval.
I'm just using it because I heard that was a $4 million garage. So I'm just trying to understand, you got $4 million investment, and you're saying it doesn't get paid back until he pays taxes, but his taxes are spread out over many, many years. I know that parking garage contractor wants to be paid pretty quickly after he builds the garage, so I'm saying, where does the $4 million that came from the public, when and where does it get applied is really the question.
The developer has to pay the cost to the contractor.
Okay.
And over time, and in this particular case from 2022 to 2034, those funds would be metered out based on the property taxes that are generated by the property. If it generates less, you don't get as much. If it generates more, you may achieve more.
So does he get a property tax deferment, or does he get a
It's a rebate. It's a rebate at the end of the tax collecting period.
So the $4 million in this case, you may not know, but are you looking at a 20-year payback? Or what size check per?
It's 11-year payback.
Okay, in my 11-year payback. So my question is, you think that deal, like the Ballard deal, they applied and several people applied and then the deals happened anyway? So you
Ballard
think,
didn't happen.
Well, it didn't happen from a CRA perspective, but the building's sitting there today.
Correct.
So my question is, what do you think about the rest of these? I don't know the particulars, but if the infrastructure investment was publicly owned, do the deals go away or not, in your opinion?
I would say for the downtown where we're asking for very intense development with structured parking, they all go away. You don't get those tax values, period, for this community.
Even
They
if
go away.
if the parking garage is owned publicly and the man leases the space, you can go to Denver, you can go to all kinds of places. If it's a public garage, you still think it goes away?
So I'm not even sure public financing of a parking garage is financially feasible. It's very costly to do structured parking in your downtown area. We're talking about $25,000 a parking space for structured parking. We're dealing with this issue right now with Eastside Parking Garage. There's a $4 million repair that has to take place on that structure to keep it viable. We're considering we may have to tear it down. And then we're trying to figure out, well, how are we going to pay for it if we tear it down and provide the 680 parking spaces that are leased out right now on a daily basis?
Well,
Okay, all right.
all right. I know it's
Hold on.
fascinating to me. Don't let me get carried away with it.
All right, Bill.
Thank you very much. This is supposed to be a committee discussion. Gordon, your vehemence is appreciated. You do understand some of this, and I appreciate it. Wayne, that was a really comprehensive presentation, and thanks. But I think, Gordon, you've got a dispute, really, with the legal opinion that the county attorney's office has presented. I don't think this committee is the place to resolve that. There are two significant bills pending in the legislature that address many of the things that I think bother you. But I think that's the venue for that kind of discussion. We've spent almost an hour on this one topic here. I don't think the committee, frankly, has the authority to move forward. I'd be happy to table it and move on. Thank you.
Okay, let's, Kathy?
Just one quick question. I know Wayne was talking about the developments not happening in the downtown district if we went with Gordon's proposal. Isn't the county in the process of removing itself from the downtown district? So
I believe the answer is yes.
Is that correct, Vince?
Just to answer that question, Madam Chair, we're in the process of bringing options back to the board on what that would look like. The CRA hasn't taken final action on that, but
Right.
the direction we got was to bring back options for the boards to consider.
Correct, and I saw what the City Commission looked at in October, where it said moving forward without the county. So that is actually a moot point, potentially, that the public infrastructure portion of what you're talking about would not affect the downtown.
Ted?
Madam Chair, we spent a considerable amount of time. We have a full agenda, and I'd suggest that we either table this or move it to another venue.
All right, is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
And the second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
We have two no, Kathy Jones and Gordon Thames. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Tedder and Mr. Goad, for coming today. I know this has been a long process, and I appreciate you taking your time out of the
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay.
On nonpartisan, you can pass it off to Vince.
I believe, Herb, you're going to take the next item. Vince, are you going to take the next item?
I'll just do just a quick introduction to Herb here. Committee members, you will recall that at your last meeting, you requested staff to bring back additional information on the ability to make constitutional officers nonpartisan. As you'll recall, the county charter currently designates the county commission and the supervisor of election as nonpartisan offices. The supervisor of elections office provided the information that you requested at your last meeting for the previous 4 election cycles. You may recall that this committee requested that party registration rates, voter turnout, party affiliation of candidates, and ethnicity of candidates was requested. All that information has been provided to you. Representatives from the Supervisor of Elections Office are here and able to answer any specific questions on the information they provided. Chris Moore joins us once again today. Committee members, you also requested that your materials include a comparison of other Florida counties. You've got the charter counties. You have those before you. I wanted to also share with you or reemphasize that the Florida constitutional revision presently convened for constitutional revisions or proposed constitutional revisions to the Florida Constitution is considering an amendment that would prohibit charter counties from modifying the powers, duties, and elected status of constitutional officers. With that as just sort of a background, I'm going to like to hand it off to Herb, who will provide a brief update on specifically another item that's considered in your analysis, which is pending litigation as it pertains to partisan elections for charter counties. Herb?
When we did the last charter amendment, the supervisor of elections actually asked us to make that office nonpartisan, and so we did in that amendment. If you had asked me, and you did a month ago, whether or not we could by charter make the constitutional officers nonpartisan, my answer would be yes. But there are these 2 new developments that may call that into question. One of which is the whole issue may be rendered moot if this Proposition 13 that's before the Constitutional Revision Commission comes out and is put on the ballot and gets approved. It would eliminate any of this. But in addition to that, the charter for Orange County in Orlando was modified some years ago to make their constitutional officers nonpartisan. That it was challenged in court, and the Orange County government lost at trial. The trial judge ruled that that was not something that could be done. By the way, I'll have some editorial comment about that here in a second. Orange County appealed that decision. Orange County is in the 5th District Court of Appeal district. We are in the 1st District Court of Appeal. Oral argument was held not that long ago, and a decision came out 2 weeks ago in which the 5th District Court of Appeal upheld the trial judge's analysis and found that Orange County could not make their constitutional officers nonpartisan, and ordered that ordinance and that charter provision be struck down. Now, we're not in the 5th, but it does have some value, if you would. All lawyers who are citing cases will, if I have to cite an Oregon case in my brief to support the proposition, I will. It's not binding on the court, but it gives them some background information. If we do this in our charter and it gets challenged, then that fifth DCA opinion will certainly be the only decision that I'm aware of that gets cited. The editorial part of it, from my perspective, and I'm not saying whether that it's a good idea or a bad idea to do the nonpartisan, is that the court found that while the Florida Constitution would allow the county to make all of those constitutional officers appointed or some other manner by which their offices are filled, it makes no sense to me that you can't, by extension, argue that you could make them a nonpartisan elected office. So you're left with the choice of making every one of those constitutional officers a charter officer and having those charter officers appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. That makes no sense to me, the logic of that. But nonetheless, I'm not an appellate judge, and that they came to the conclusion that Orange County could not make the constitutional officers nonpartisan. So where does that leave us? I'm not really sure. I think we should obviously proceed cautiously because we do have some precedent in the 5th District that indicates that we cannot do that. That would not prohibit us from going forward with the amendment that you all are talking about. It just would be a potential problem. And in November, it could be rendered moot if this constitutional amendment moves forward. So that's the update.
Okay, do we have questions or comments?
So, I mean, it just sounds like the court was saying where you have elections, you can't keep parties out. If you want to take the politics out, you can always do an appointment.
Yes.
Okay.
That's basically what they concluded.
Yeah.
Ken.
I appreciate that. I guess heard some rumblings about that Orange County decision. In our own district here, we have Wakulla County who went nonpartisan in its constitutional officers. So I think, from my perspective, a precedent's been set in this district, and I think we ought to examine and move forward with the proposal that our constitutional officers become nonpartisan for lots of reasons that I've stated in the past, that 20% of our electorate are disenfranchised because they can't vote in the primary. The concern of not electing Democrats and African Americans to our community is somewhat erroneous because we have the city, the county, and the school board that are represented by Democrats and minority individuals. So the concern and the fear that I think, is not justified. So I would like the community, and that's why I bring this up, I'd like the community to decide whether or not we want nonpartisan races for our constitutional officers, and therefore I propose that we elevate this to the county commission and to our citizens.
Kathy.
Thank you. I will say I don't think that we should make a decision based on what the Florida Constitution Revision Commission may or may not do, and therefore what the voters may or may not approve on the ballot. I do, however, think that we should take into great consideration the ruling that Herb brought forward. Just because something was done in Wakulla County and has not been brought forward yet in the form of a lawsuit, to me isn't even something to take note of in this particular case. I am against making the offices nonpartisan. However, I have heard what people have said, and I do recognize and appreciate that no party affiliation people have the right to vote. They should have the right to vote. And I actually have no idea what the answer to this is. I'm going to imagine there's absolutely nothing that we can do. But your own elections locally, Herb, I mean, is there anything that you can do to open them up to all voters? No, I didn't think so. I do appreciate it. However, you know, we've heard from the constitutional officers themselves who said, don't make them no party affiliation, and I have to respect what they've said.
Reggie.
At this point, I don't think we should take any action on this because although we do have Democrats and African Americans and others who are elected as constitutional officers, there's too much of an unknown for me to change the policy at this point. So I would not want to make any action on this item at this time.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
A second. And would you comment?
Vince, did you say there was someone from the Supervisor of Elections office that was here to maybe take questions?
There is. Chris Moore, right behind you. Chris, you want to come on up?
I would just be curious of the perspective of that office in terms of from their perspective, what the pros and cons would be of making this change.
All right. Well, I'm Chris Moore. I'm the Deputy Supervisor of Elections here in Leon County. Mark Early would be here, but he's in Washington, D.C. at an elections conference. I think the role of the Supervisor of Elections here is to provide people with ballots and provide them with voting services. We do candidate qualifications, and sometimes with party changes that things tend to jump around. I guess statistically, it's hard to say that having nonpartisan elections has more people eligible. Those are just numbers, but I'm not sure that this office has an opinion on whether it should or should not be nonpartisan.
And I'm not looking for an opinion per se. It's just your perspective. If this change were to happen, do you have any perspective on what the ramifications might be in terms of voting patterns or individuals elected to office? Just what the impact might be on the ground.
Right. To the voters specifically, or just in general?
To how it would change the field in terms of candidates and their ability to successfully attain office.
Right. Well, what it would change is that in a party system, you have a party primary, and then you have a general election, which becomes a runoff between those. So it would somewhat simplify that. If you had nonpartisan elections, you kind of put them all in the primary, and if no one gets 50%, you go to the general, and the top two would go there. So it would do that. I think otherwise, I'm not sure I know what would change. Right now, we have quite a mix here in the county. We have some nonpartisan offices, and we have some partisan offices, and they both seem to work. And I think I've heard many of the arguments on either side, and I don't know that I can dispute any of them, really, as far as that goes, and party affiliation speaking to things about candidates. I can't find flaws in any of the things you've heard on either side, quite honestly.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just a point of order. When I spoke in support of the nonpartisan, I intended that to be a motion. So I was hoping that you would call that and ask for a second.
Okay, do we have a motion and a second. And I understood that you wanted to do that, but it was not in the form of a motion. So we have a motion and a second. Do we want to vote? Jay, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just had a question. And this is more just, I don't know, maybe curiosity than anything else, but is there somewhere in the state constitution that outlines, let me back up a step. So parties are private entities, correct? They're private organizations, right? I'm just curious, is it laid out somewhere in the state constitution that public funds are supposed to be used to hold elections for these private entities?
Yes.
I was curious. I didn't know that. That's just interesting to me.
It's not for the entities, it's for the offices.
Right. Yeah, which the whole thing is, and maybe that's a generational thing. I don't know, for me, I think parties are quickly losing relevance. I think you have on a local, you already have a scenario where locally I think we have outstanding candidates who arrive into office via nonpartisan elections. I'm a fan of nonpartisan elections. I think every time you get an opportunity to expand the electorate and let more people have a say in the process, it's a good thing. I know it seems like there's certainly complications to that with the environment, but I certainly support the idea.
All right, we have a motion and a second to not move this item forward. We'll call the roll now.
Reginald Ellis.
Yes.
Michael Urick.
Yes.
Neil Fleckenstein.
Yes.
William Graham.
Yes.
Lee Hopkins.
Yes.
Sorry, Lee Hinkle. Shane Hopkins.
Yes.
Kathy Jones.
Yes.
Casey Perkins.
Yes.
Ennis Prosser.
No.
Jay Revel.
No.
Gordon Thames.
Yes.
Ted Thomas.
No.
Kim Williams.
No.
Motion passes.
All right, so the item does not move forward. All right, we're ready to move to Section 5 of the agenda, and that is amendment language for the committee consideration. I'd like to remind all of you that as a committee, we voted to request that staff prepare proposed charter amendment language of the following items. The county administrator and county attorney are going to walk us through each of those items separately, and then after their comments, we'll discuss each item. At the conclusion of that discussion, we'll need to vote as to how we want to proceed. And I'll remind you that to take this to the next level and to bring the proposed amendment language to a public hearing requires a simple majority vote.
You can pass it off to Vince.
Yeah. Herb, are you or Vince going to take us forward?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, just very briefly, committee members, at your last meeting, you requested that staff draft proposed language, charter amendment language, eliminating the current $250 campaign contribution limitation in the county charter. You'll see the stricken language that's before you in the analysis, which would effectuate that. As noted in the materials, the $250 limit was approved by 66% of the voters as a charter amendment in 2010. You have a summary there, which you've requested, of individual campaign fund balances in the last 3 election cycles. Again, representatives of the Supervisor of Elections Office are here to answer any specific questions you might have on that. You have a series of options before you on this, and Madam Chair, I'll hand it back to you to facilitate the committee discussion.
All right. Do we have folks who would like to make comments on this item? And if so or if not, we'll need a motion to dispense with this item. Neil.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Neil, you had your had your card up.
So I appreciate the analysis that staff did. So was this 2010, this passed from the previous Charter Review Committee, 65.5%. I believe that was the highest proportion that supported any of the amendments, the charter amendments that year. I went in and looked at the data on this. My compliments to the Supervisor of Elections site, just for a data wonk. It's just awesome what you've got there. Of the 165 precincts that voted on this particular amendment, 164 passed it. That's pretty astounding to me. 164 out of 165 passed this amendment. The one that didn't, precinct 1506, it tied at 1 vote apiece, which makes me wonder. We have a precinct with 2 people voting, but anyway, that's beside the point. 99.4% of the precincts supported this amendment to decrease campaign contributions, which to me really gives me a good indication of the level of support back in 2010, and would make me really question going in the opposite direction at this point. I just think that's a real clear direction that the public gave this just a few years ago.
Michael.
I just want to draw to the committee's attention on page 48 that a wonderful analysis was done on campaign surplus. And between the limitation on the 250 and the state's 1,000, there is no substantive change in the percentage of candidates who had surplus or actually the level of surplus at the end of the campaign cycle. So I don't see where adjusting this from its current level to 1,000 is going to, or to the state's level, is going to really make any difference that we're looking at.
Okay, I don't see any other cards up. Bill.
Just a quick question. I wasn't here at the prior meeting when there was debate on this idea, so I was curious if anybody wanted to reiterate for my benefit the idea. Why? Because I think it passed pretty clearly last time.
And the motion before us, your motion is to allow it to go back to the state limit, which is $1,000.
Right. The two things, particularly, one is that the limit on the contributions at the time it was reduced to 250 was 500. Okay. So the amount of legal contributions at the state level is now at 1,000. And the second is that there's two vehicles to fund campaigns, and one of them is a 527 or whatever it's called. So that somebody with a lot of money can dump a lot more than 250 or 1,000 in there. But then there's not much accountability for who that is or where that comes from. Whereas these contributions will be made directly to the campaign accounts of the individual candidates by an individual who will be named as a regular reporting period on the candidate's reporting form. Right. So I think there's more accountability, and I think it gives an opportunity to those who might contribute more than 250 but aren't a 527 candidate. So I just think it's a better way to fund elections.
Thank you. That makes sense. Thank you.
Neil.
I'm fine. Thank you.
Ted.
Do we have any indication? You said $135,000 surplus. Was that an unopposed candidate, or who was that? Was that an election, or
in the local election?
Any ideas? Or that seems like a significant amount of money.
I don't even know if you heard your question.
What's that?
I'm not sure you heard your question.
Oh.
We have a question to the supervisor's representative. Ted, do you want to repeat that?
Yes. The $135,000 left in the campaign account, was that a candidate who was unopposed, or who would that be?
I'd have to look. We have a more detailed breakdown that we submitted. This one is the summary. I don't have the other one in front of me, but I can say that the range is kind of all over the place when you look at what's left over in balances, and when you're trying to pick apart why someone gets elected, which if that's one of the questions, we have candidates who have a lot of money that don't get elected. We have candidates who don't have a lot of money that get elected. So when you're kind of trying to get after the root of it, some folks are very well funded. I believe when Superintendent Pons ran for re-election back in 2012, he had a lot of money raised against the candidate, Sabrina Allen, I believe, who really wasn't a candidate who was going to win. And so he ended up with a lot of money that he then had to dispose of. So there's different reasons why they may have the money. A lot of times when they're raising money, they don't know if they're going to draw opposition. It's going to be formidable. So the campaign raising, the money raising happens before they maybe know who it is they're going to be going up against once qualification happens. Does that answer your question, or do you want a specific name for that 136?
No, that's close enough.
Okay. Is your card up?
No.
Okay. Are we ready for a vote? All right, and we'll restate the motion. You want to restate you want to read it?
Sure.
Well, no, I'll go ahead and say it is to revert back to the state contribution maximum. All right, so would you call the roll?
Yes. Reginald Ellis?
Yes.
Michael Urick,
No.
Neil Fleckenstein,
No.
William Graham,
Yes.
Lee Hinkle,
Yes.
Shane Hopkins,
Yes.
Kathy Jones,
Yes.
Casey Perkins,
Yes.
Annis Prosser,
No.
Jay Revel,
Yes.
Gordon Thames,
No.
Ted Thomas,
Yes.
Kim Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Next item, Code of Ethics.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Your next item, 5B, provides proposed charter amendment language and additional information related to the Code of Ethics, which you considered at your last meeting. Leon County currently has an ethics policy that closely follows the state law. We provided that analysis to you again at your last meeting. A charter amendment requiring the county to adopt an ordinance will further elevate the importance and visibility of the county's ethics rules. While we completely support a charter amendment and the creation of an ordinance, given the attention to ethics in local government in our community, we also recently developed an ethics code field manual, which we've called it for our employees. We just wanted to share that with you. We distributed that to our board at our annual retreat. I believe, Heather, that's in our materials? Okay. So you'll have that there again. That's nothing that you need to act on. That's just your information. Again, I think it just very, very clearly sort of articulates what is and abbreviates what is a much, much larger document. Again, just for your consideration. In addition, committee members, you requested materials that provide specific provisions from each county's charters regarding their codes of ethics, requirements and applicability of these codes to constitutional officers. Among these, Broward, Clay, and Duval charters are the only ones which specifically state that their code of ethics applies to all elected constitutional officers. However, our county attorney states in the item that the county is unable to impose a code of ethics or related penalties on constitutional officers unless they become charter officers. That seems to be a recurring theme here today, and I know Herb can elaborate on that. But per the committee's direction, you have two versions of the amendment language before you, and one that is applicable to constitutional officers and one that is not. And then, of course, as you are familiar with now, you have sort of the standard options articulated before you, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Neil?
Not per se a question, just I had raised this in our, when we were throwing out issues, and really I think you did a great job of capturing my sentiment, which is simply raising the importance and visibility of the importance of ethics to our standards of conduct in all local government, both in terms of elected officials as well as county employees and folks lobbying in front of the county. And I compliment Vince and the county for what you've just done in terms of the ethics policy for the community. But I think it's vital that we elevate it also in terms of the charter, the governing constitution of the county, and put it front and first and foremost in that. So I'm very supportive of this. In terms of reading the two different versions, it's apparent that there would be some challenges implementing or applying this to the constitutional officers. I would make a motion that we endorse version 1 that's not applicable to constitutional officers, but I would point out that in the fourth sentence of the language that you have for that, or the fourth line, basically you just have a sentence that kind of ends. Third line says ethics no later. Basically the fourth line just says and shall, and then the next word is the, and it's capitalized. So I think there's some wordsmithing needs to go on there. I think you need to eliminate the words and shall. I'll let staff take a look at that. But I would make a motion to endorse version 1, which is an ethics code that's not applicable to constitutional officers.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Ted, you had your card up.
No, it's clear now. I was trying to figure out what we were voting on, and I think Neil clarified that.
Now, I recognize it's not going to include constitutional officers. I would like to say, though, I can't imagine a constitutional officer who would not support and appreciate and want the public to know that they also uphold to a code of ethics.
Okay, we'll call the vote.
Reginald Ellis.
Yes.
Michael Urick.
Yes.
Neil Fleckenstein.
Yes.
William Graham.
Yes.
Lee Hinkle.
Yes.
Shane Hopkins.
Yes.
Catherine Jones.
Yes.
Casey Perkins.
Yes.
Annis Prosser.
Yes.
Jay Revel.
Yes.
Gordon Thames.
Yes.
Ted Thomas.
Yes.
Kim Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. We have the fourth item, modifying the district composition of the Leon County Board of County Commissioners.
Hiring and firing date.
I'm sorry, I just skipped.
Did we decide what we were doing yet?
We'll revert back to the third issue. Yes, hiring and firing process for the county attorney.
I really am glad that Jay got this going so that my name will be on the ballot. If you see on page 102, that's the proposed language. It takes verbatim the language from the charter that's applicable to the county administrator and just puts it in that section for the county attorney with a tweak that makes it have more sense. And so it's ready for prime time. I may not be, but it is.
Move approval. Second.
All right, any other discussion? Call the roll.
Reginald Ellis.
Yes.
Michael Urick.
Yes.
Neil Fleckenstein.
Yes.
William Graham.
Yes.
Lee Hinkle.
Yes.
Shane Hopkins.
Yes.
Catherine Jones.
Yes.
Casey Perkins.
Yes.
Annis Prosser.
Yes.
Jay Revel.
Yes.
Gordon Thames.
Yes.
Ted Thomas.
Yes.
Kim Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, now we'll jump to the fourth item.
Madam Chair, the fourth item is the modification of the manner by which the county commissioners would be elected in the future. It's for a significant and fairly big item. The language on page 112 is pretty easy. It's just a strike through and replacement to make it 3 at-large and 4 single district commissioners. That's how it would go generally on the ballot. I can tell you that I have not, because it hasn't gone, in my mind, it hasn't gone far enough along in the process. I have not been in touch with the NAACP local chapter president because it was premature in my mind to talk to them about that. I certainly, as it works its way, if it does, towards the Board of County Commissioners, we certainly will open up a dialogue. What they decide they will do about that is up to them. But our analysis is essentially still the same. A, we're still under the directive of the Federal District Court, and we would either need to go there unilaterally, when I say unilaterally, opposed by the former plaintiffs, and ask the court to either approve this or relinquish jurisdiction. Obviously, it would be easier if the NAACP agreed with whatever position we were taking. It sounds like that's not going to be the case, and so we would just have to proceed accordingly. Now, just so you know, we've worked with the NAACP after the last 3 censuses to change the district boundary lines. As populations grew here since the time of the original court order, we've had to maintain the same sort of majority district, minority influence district, and you have to have fairly equal populations in each of the 5 districts. And so after each census, we have coordinated with them and petitioned the court with their approval to change the district boundary lines to where they are today. So it's not something that we have not worked with them before, but each of those times it was maintaining the 2 at-large, 5 district commissioners, and so we would have to engage in that same sort of process. The caveat I think I put in the materials is I don't know that it would be possible. It's possible, but I doubt it, that process of going to the district court and getting the district court to approve will be done before the ballot is due in the supervisor's office in August. So just a warning. That's it.
Okay. Kim?
Herb, is it possible to make the changes that you described and take the legal action that's necessary to get to that point outside of the charter amendment, or does it have to be done by charter amendment?
Because it is now in the charter, it has to be done by charter amendment.
Okay. And secondly, I'd like my good friend Ken Hart, who's not here, I know the reason that he proposed this was to allow all members of the electoral body or everybody that's a voter in Lynn County have the right to vote for 4 of the 7 county commissioners, so they could vote for the majority. Having said that, if it can't be done outside the charter, then I'll just stand down and let the committee decide what to do. But I think this is an impediment to the success of the charter revision that we would, as a group, would be trying to make. And unless you had the court case solved first, I think it's kind of a bad idea to put it in the charter.
Well, let me, and I'll make a comment because I've done a little bit of asking around about what the potential time frame would be, because I agree with Herb that I don't think we can get a court decision rendered by 2018, which would mean if we sent this forward, it would be on the 2020, potentially on the 2020 ballot. I also know that the redistricting would have to be done anyway after the census is drawn. So if that's the case, it might potentially be 2022 before the lines could be drawn. I think it's important to have the case readdressed by the federal court because it was a 1985 decision, and I think a lot has happened since then. So whatever the will of the committee is, I would like to recommend, even if it doesn't go on as an amendment, that we suggest to the county commission that they look at revisiting that decision. That said, Jay, you had your card up.
So Herb, I was looking at it with the piece from our charter that outlines the districts and the makeup, and I guess I had always thought that the recommendations from the court were actually included in the charter as far as the majority district and the minority access district, but that's just in that ruling. It's not actually in our charter, correct?
That's correct.
Should that be something that, I mean, is that something that you can put in a charter, and should we do that?
I think it's something you could. I wouldn't advise that we do that. I think it ought to just be plain.
Okay.
If we have 7 districts and they're drawn so that there is a minority access district, a minority district and a minority access district, did the court specify that it had to be 5 and 2, or that it, as long as you have an access district and a minority district?
No, it specified the 5-2.
5 and 2. Okay. Kathy.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and move that we take no further action at this time in light of the potential of not being able to get the court case solved, and also in light of the fact that the NAACP is not supportive of this.
Second.
I'll second.
All right. Any other comment? We're ready for a vote. And we'll restate the motion to take no further action on this item.
Can we include your suggestion that the county look to make sure that the... do you want to make a motion of that or not?
Let's dispose of this.
Yeah, I will not accept that as a friendly amendment.
And then let's look at this, and then if you want to make an amendment afterwards.
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Reginald Ellis,
Yes.
Michael Urick,
Yes.
Neil Fleckenstein,
Yes.
William Graham,
Yes.
Lee Hinkle,
No.
Shane Hopkins,
Yes.
Catherine Jones,
Yes.
Casey Perkins,
No.
Annis Prosser,
No.
Jay Revel,
No.
Gordon Thames,
Yes.
Ted Thomas,
No.
Kim Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay,
8-5. Motion passes 8-5.
8-5. Is there any sentiment to make a recommendation to the county commission?
I hesitate to do it because I know the feeling of this committee at this point. So I don't know that we know how long that would take or how much that would cost. I'd hate to put us in a lengthy, expensive lawsuit for perhaps something that with the census will. It would be nice to be able to vote for 4, and that would be my only. But you ought to be able to adjust the districts without eliminating the protection that's there, and still allow 4 of them to be at large. But I don't feel strongly enough about it to make a motion to that end.
Okay. All right. We've done some good work. At this point, I think we'll move. Let me reiterate. We have 3 items that we're going to move forward with language for the public hearings. That is increasing campaign contribution limits, code of ethics, and the hiring and firing process for county attorney. We've done some good work so far. This is the last day for us to take up new ideas for consideration and then potentially to ask the staff to come back with recommendations. So are there any other new ideas that you'd like to bring forward? Any committee members? We have, yes, Kathy.
Yes, they don't have to be new ideas. They just have to be ideas that were not voted on to take no further action on. Is that correct?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, you know, in 2010, the Liberty County Sheriff was arrested. In October of 2017, the Jefferson County Clerk of Court was arrested on petty charges and allegations he took naked photos of his then girlfriend in the judge's chambers in the courthouse of Monticello. In December of 2017, the Madison County Supervisor of Elections is being investigated by FDLE for overpaying himself. And he said in a letter to the governor, and I would like to quote on this, where he said, "The thing about it is, where does it say a constitutional officer only gets paid once a month or once a week? And after receiving some poor advice, I was under the impression that as a constitutional officer, I had control of my budget as my salary is set annually and not monthly. Further, it was my understanding that as long as my budget balanced at the end of the calendar year, I had latitude to make salary advances." The only reason FDLE found out about this is because of an anonymous tip that was given to them. My point here is 3 counties within way less than a decade, within an hour of Leon County, have had constitutional officers with legal issues. Okay? I realized before I was not supported in this, but there's a couple details I'd like to point out to you. According to the Florida State Constitution, county commissioners can be removed from office by the electorate. Okay? It is a little bit of a convoluted process, but we as people can go ahead and through signatures and a ballot, we can move to have them removed from office. The only person who has authority to remove constitutional officers is a movement by the government, a suspension by the governor, and then it has to be approved by the Senate. Okay. And I am, again, not stating that we have ethical issues with our constitutional officers. I am just saying that because our constitutional offices were established by the Florida Constitution in 1885, maybe it is time to give the people of Leon County an opportunity to vote for what they may or may not want. All I am asking for is staff analysis to come back and look at what an appointed structure would look like for the supervisor of elections, which we had a citizen a little while ago saying there should be no politics, okay, in constitutional offices. I agree with that. So the supervisor of elections, the clerk of court, the property appraiser, and not the sheriff, tax collector, thank you very much, just to see what it would look like. It may not be feasible. It may not look good. I would just like the opportunity for us as a committee to analyze it and discuss it. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, are you putting that in the form of a motion?
I am.
And we have a second.
One quick, just so you want more information, right?
That's all. All I'm asking
I'll
for.
second the request for more information.
Can I ask Herb, put you on the spot for a second? Do you know, just offhand, is there an obvious legal impediment or theory that differentiates between how a county commission is addressed versus a constitutional officer that has, requires the governor's and the Senate's input?
Well, first, here in Leon County, the recall, if you would, applies to the county commissioners because we put it in our charter. If you're not a charter county, there is no such thing. It is exclusively that list of 7 malfeasance, misfeasance, public drunkenness, my favorite, and that are grounds for the governor to suspend or remove you constitutional officer, including county commissioners, from office. So that's not an issue. If this committee want to see language that would make those 4 of the other 5 constitutional officers appointed, we could draft that.
I don't want to see language. I would just like to see what a process would look like if they were appointed, because we haven't even, looked at that. I'm not suggesting we bring back draft language. I'm just suggesting we bring back further analysis to look at the process. That's all.
Okay, I don't see any other cards. Are we ready for a vote?
Do we have a second?
We do have a second.
I second the request for more information.
And so we'll need 4 votes to move this forward for information purposes.
Reginald Ellis,
No.
Michael Urick,
Yes.
Neil Fleckenstein,
For informational purposes, yes.
William Graham,
Yes.
Lee Hinkle,
No.
Shane Hopkins,
No.
Kathy Jones,
Yes.
Casey Perkins,
Yes.
Ennis Prosser,
Yes.
Jay Revel,
Sure.
Gordon Thames,
Yes.
Ted Thomas,
No.
Kim Williams.
No.
Motion passes.
Okay. We have, I think we're pretty close to the end of our meeting. What I'd like to do is to have kind of a recap of what we've done so far. I think we've done some really good work. I would like Vince to go through this with us, and then at our next meeting next week, we'll receive information based on the last motion that passed, and we'll have charter language to look at for the 3 items that we had.
No, you won't have any charter language. Like those will all move to public hearing, so this would be the only item on your agenda.
All right, this is the only item then on our agenda next week. The language will move forward to the public hearing, We'll have 3 public hearings that will be held. Those will be at 6 in the evening here in the Commission chambers on successive weeks. At the end of those public hearings, then we will vote on the language that is before us. It'll require 10 votes to move forward to the County Commission. And if we have consensus on the issue next week to have a motion to have that included, that would also be on the public hearing. So, Vince, would you like to go through with us where we are?
What you see before you, ladies and gentlemen, on the screen is just a snapshot of what you've done so far and where we stand. Obviously, the first category there, 1 through 4, indicates the issues that you've considered and taken no further action on, followed by those that you've requested additional information and analysis, and finally, 7 through 10, plus those that you've advanced today, are those which you are considering draft charter amendment language to and will be moving to public hearing on.
Okay. Any other questions? We have had a request by Commissioner Proctor to make a few comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, charter members. Charter members, because of this being a narrowing window for new ideas, this is a couple things I'm hopeful that you all might consider. Have no ideas other than to trust your judgment about this. I brought to our county commission's awareness of trending with the Constitutional Revision Commission is the possibility of the designation of Tallahassee being the state capital. And I think recently, within the last week or so, I read or saw where a legislative proposal has been offered, potentially to look at a study to create another designation in Florida for a city to be designated for state capital status. So now we have tracking in 2 pipelines, one a legislative proposal as a legislative act, and 2 or 3, 4 proposals that are in the pipeline called constitutional revision. Either of those could be lethal. My ask today is, and I apologize for not having clarity, but seeing new ideas, and I'm just thinking about our community. If we lose 40% of the jobs in Tallahassee, I think that, I'm not even sure, but I'm just thinking and asking if you would think with me, that I think that all of us as a city, county, it's just from a lot of angles, the Chamber of Commerce is, all of that, on what do we do in creating a transitional authority to deal with our loss of state capital designation and jobs which might be lost. Whether we have a negotiation committee, council, or whether or not we are fighting for a study to study what that loss would be like. But as we're asking for information, I don't think that it's premature with a constitutional revision to move, and now state senator's proposal to move the capital, that we, being located physically across the street from what might be hostile houses and ideas, would be a tremendous loss. I don't even know how to put it in quantitatively what the ripple effect would be. But is it premature that some information is forthcoming? Because I think that we need to put our dukes up in the air and be ready to start swinging and fighting. This occurred, if I remember, in '69 or so, and we had great legislators then who fought back. And if this matter gets put on which I think that we would have to fight and fight it legally and find some basis to confront it. But I can't imagine placing on Florida's ballot a statewide question. Do y'all want them 40-some thousand $40,000 jobs in Central Florida or South Florida? Which one wants it bad? And we ain't got enough voters up here to protect our interests than to ask where 80% of the state ain't going to turn down 40,000 guaranteed jobs to come in there. Y'all, this is serious. And I don't know what else. So that's an idea, and I don't know how the committee could advance it, but please, committee, with the minds here, we can't ignore it. Secondly, as a new idea for our committee's consideration, I plead with you to please consider establishment of a Leon County Water Commission. And with the issues of fracking occurring, the Department of Environmental Protection, it's almost incredible we use the word protection there, an oxymoron. The issue of drilling that I read that we just escaped narrowly by the hairs of our chins. We have Georgia Power in Perry, an issue which I stepped out of this county to go to Taylor County to ponder why does Georgia Power get a permit to pump waste and spent water directly into the Gulf of Mexico. Water, I believe, is a very interesting matter that deserves empowering a citizens group to look at these matters. The issue of bottling water, the treatment of water, over in Jackson County, what you call it, injection, well injection of waste over in Mariana into the aquifer. I mean, y'all is getting crazy. And I think that we need authority that has regional reach, because water doesn't really, it's not Leon County, Madison County. That water down there is everybody's water. And we would do ourselves a disservice. In fact, speaking of water, not only is Georgia and Alabama had a football fight the other night, but just a few days before, they was in court duking it out over water. The issue about water ain't going away. And our county commissioners are great commissioners, but this deliberative body could do a lot to advance and give our commission something firm to stand on, if you see it. And then one of the perilous concerns, this body across our street, which is very hostile to this area, in my opinion, the transfer of water, or the piping of Florida and aquifer water, or Wakulla's water, all the other water in North Florida going to South Florida so that the golf courses can be really green, is a concern. And with development at the rapid pace in which, rapid enough, if you want to quantify it, Dr. Ellis, that quantification can best be seen that picking up 2 congressional seats, that tell you how much growth is occurring. That's how I measure growth. We're picking up 2 congressional seats. And with that, more people drinking water, and the need for water is in Central and South Florida. I'm just asking y'all, it's all of our water. Please, please, please give consideration. There's a new idea for committee consideration, some kind of water empowered commission or something like that, because of for the reasons I've listed. Thank you all, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Commissioner Proctor. Kathy?
Yeah, Commissioner Proctor, thank you very much. I don't know how this committee could address the issue of Tallahassee as the state capital. I mean, it is the state capital. But I do think I've been following, that particular concept and moving it back to or moving it to Orlando. I think the best place for that is with the county commission. I mean, we have the chairman sitting in here right now, and he is also leading the commission on the legislative dialogue for Leon County. And I think, what we can say is, Mr. Chairman, you guys make sure that you lobby to keep Tallahassee as our capital.
Please.
Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to say I appreciate the work you guys do. As I said last time I was in this chamber, it's just interesting and actually kind of fun to watch somebody else squirm in the seats as they make their decisions. So I appreciate you guys doing what you're doing and accepting this huge task. As far as the issue at hand of the state capitol moving, I think it's a big issue for everybody in Leon County. The city of Tallahassee is something that would drastically change the character of our community, and it would create blight that we've never seen in this region or in this state. I don't think anybody would have ever seen the blight that we have to get through if that would happen. I think that Commissioner Proctor's point is well taken by this board and is well taken by our commissioners. I think we're all watching it. What I would suggest, Madam Chair, is that if this committee wanted to do anything, a letter to the county commission from the chairwoman expressing concern from this committee, if you have that concern, would be fitting to have us at least make some, or at least consider the issue, which we're already considering. And if you also wanted to do something, I would suggest also a letter from the chair of this committee to the legislative committee as well to express your concern as well. Though this committee was convened specifically for CRC, if you look around the table, there's nothing but leaders in this committee, and a lot of what you have to say carries a lot of weight within the community. And so, to say that you have consensus amongst this community, this is something we should keep our eye on. Wouldn't be a bad thing. So, Madam Chair, if I could make those two suggestions, that's what I would suggest. Thank you
very much. So, Gordon.
I would just follow, and I'd try to follow that with a motion to empower you to perhaps bring us drafts of those two letters he requests, or I don't know if that would be the appropriate motion, but I like the idea of at least a letter.
Do we have a second?
I second that.
All right. We would ask staff to bring back a letter for us to look at next week at our meeting.
I'm sorry, and as for the water issue, I've said this before, water doesn't have political boundaries, and I don't think that we can necessarily control the water issues for our region. I appreciate it. I'm not opposed to water. I like it, but I don't know what authority the Charter Committee has in creating a water group. And I think, Neil, you're much more able to discuss this.
Neil.
To begin, I'm happy that Kathy has nothing against water. We all feel good about that. From the land conservation perspective, water resource protection is one of the most important things that we do. We are absolutely blessed, given our location in the state and the quality and quantity of water that we're sitting on top of. It is an issue that we deal with in terms of other parts of the state, jealously looking at what we have from a water resource protection standpoint, or from water supply standpoint. I know one of the previous charter review commissions adopted, I think, minimum county environmental standards as part of a previous iteration of this group. I don't know if other charters around the state have specifically taken out and focused on water resource protection as a primary emphasis of county policy, but frankly, I'd be interested in at least some staff analysis to see how other areas have dealt with this, if they have dealt with this in the past. I think given the importance of that resource, I think it's worth at a minimum looking at that. So I would support having staff evaluate how the charter might elevate the issue of water resource protection. And I would put that in the form of a motion.
That's a motion, I second.
That is a motion.
All right. Actually, we have a previous motion that is on the table, and then we'll take up yours.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. So the first motion is to have a letter of recommendation from the committee to go to the legislative delegation and to the county commission opposing moving the capital. All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. The second motion is to bring back next week for our discussion a water resource protection, information on water resource protection.
Yes, ma'am.
And how it might possibly fit into a charter.
Reginald Ellis,
Yes.
Michael Urick,
Yes.
Neil Fleckenstein,
Yes.
William Graham,
Yes.
Lee Hinkle,
Yes.
Shane Hopkins,
Yes.
Kathy Jones,
Yes.
Casey Perkins,
Yes.
Annis Prosser,
Yes.
Jay Revel,
Yes.
Gordon Thames,
Yes.
Ched Thomas,
Yes.
Kim Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, we have on our agenda next Thursday the information on appointed constitutional officers, and we'll have the water resource protection issue, and then we'll also look at the letter. If we have no further business after that meeting, we'll schedule the public hearings for successive weeks after that. So does anybody have any other questions? All right, thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned.
Minutes for you to sign.